It started the night I took the long way home from my shift at the diner. I usually clocked out around 11:30, but that night my manager asked me to stay late to help clean up after a fryer overflowed. I didn't leave until close to 1 a.m. The diner was in a small town off Route 47, a quiet stretch of highway that ran through nothing but cornfields and dark farmland. Normally I'd take the main route home, but there was construction, so I cut through the back roads. That was my first mistake. It was one of those moonless nights when the sky looks like an endless sheet of black. My car's headlights barely cut through the darkness. The radio wasn't working, static, no signal, so it was just me, the hum of the tires and the faint whine of the engine. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed something behind me. A pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, far off at first, then closer, then too close. It was a black SUV, the kind with tinted windows and bright LED headlights that make everything ahead look washed out. I figured it was just someone driving fast, so I slowed down a bit to let them pass. But they didn't. They matched my speed. I pressed my lips together and turned down a gravel road, hoping maybe they were going somewhere else. The SUV turned too. That was the moment my stomach dropped. I told myself not to panic. Maybe they lived nearby. Maybe it was a coincidence. But then they flashed their high beams, once, twice, slow, like a signal. The road curved sharply and I could see the SUV swerving slightly, staying just far enough behind me to be out of reach. I thought about pulling over, but what then? There were no houses, no lights, just endless cornfields stretching out into the dark. I checked my phone, no signal. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried to convince myself this wasn't what it looked like, but every time I sped up, they did too. Every time I slowed down, they slowed too. Then they turned off their headlights. The only thing I could see now was darkness behind me. Total black. No glow, no light. Just the faint hum of my tires and my pulse roaring in my ears. I gripped the wheel tighter and hit the gas. The road was narrow and uneven, but I didn't care. My headlights bounced wildly across the gravel, dust rising like smoke. I drove blind turns and prayed not to crash. Then suddenly, the SUV's headlights came back on. They were right behind me, close enough that I could see the grille shining in my rear view. They honked twice. Long, deep, guttural honks that echoed across the fields. There was a side road ahead, barely visible, half covered in weeds. But I took it. I cut hard left and turned off my own headlights, heart hammering. I rolled down the narrow dirt path for maybe 50 feet, then stopped. Killed the engine, waited, silence. All I could hear was the faint ticking of my cooling engine. Then I saw them. The SUV barreled down the main road, its lights sweeping across the fields, then slowed to a crawl. They stopped, reversed. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. The SUV idled there for what felt like a full minute. Then the lights turned off again. They were looking for me. I crouched low in the driver's seat, praying they wouldn't turn down the same dirt road. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I could barely hold my phone steady as I tried dialing 911. No bars. Of course. And then I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. They had turned. I ducked down until my head was below the window line. My fingers were gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I couldn't see them, but I could hear it. The rumble of the engine. The slow, rhythmic crunch of tires approaching. Then when the sound stopped, the car was right beside me. I could feel it, and then came a soft tap on my window. I froze. My entire body went cold. The tap came again, slower this time, like knuckles brushing the glass. Then a whisper. You shouldn't hide. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even angry. It was calm. Too calm. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My throat locked up. I reached for the ignition, turned the key, but it wouldn't start. The car stuttered, engine clicking uselessly. The voice came again right outside the window. Come out now. I slammed my foot on the gas. Nothing. Again, nothing. The third time, the engine roared to life. I didn't even look back. I threw the car into reverse, backed out so fast I nearly spun, then shot back onto the main road. The SUV followed. This time I didn't slow down. I didn't think. I just drove. Gravel turned to asphalt and I hit nearly 90 mph. My headlights blurred through the trees. In the mirror I could see the SUV gaining, closing the distance, lights blazing. Then a deer bolted across the road. I swerved hard. My car spun, tires screeching, and slammed into the ditch. My head hit the steering wheel, pain bursting through my skull. I looked up through the windshield and the SUV had stopped. 50 feet away, a figure got out. I could barely see them through the haze, tall, wearing dark clothes. They started walking toward my car, slow and steady, like they had all the time in the world. I fumbled with my seatbelt, ripped it free, and crawled across the passenger side, kicking open the door. I scrambled out and bolted into the cornfield. The stalks slapped against my face as I ran. My breathing was ragged, my chest on fire. Behind me, I heard footsteps and heavy ones, and that same voice again, calling calmly. You can't run forever. I don't know how long I ran. The cornfield felt endless, but eventually I saw lights, the faint glow of a farmhouse in the distance. I sprinted toward it, waving my arms, screaming. The front door opened and an older man stepped out, shotgun in hand. He must have seen how terrified I was because he immediately called the sheriff. By the time the deputy arrived, the black SUV was gone. Not a single tire track left on the main road, just gravel scattered from my crash. The next day, they towed my car out of the ditch. The sheriff said they'd check traffic cameras along Route 47. A week later, he called me back. There was no record of any SUV matching that description anywhere on the route that night. Not one. He said maybe it was local kids messing around, but I know what I heard. And I'll never forget that voice, calm, steady, and too close to my ear. You shouldn't hide. When I first moved into the old building on 8th and Willow, the landlord told me the best part was the peace and quiet. No parties, no noise complaints, mostly retirees, he'd said proudly, jangling a ring of keys that looked like they'd been around since the 1960s. At the time, peace and quiet were exactly what I needed. My last apartment had been a nightmare. Thin walls, loud neighbors, and a couple next door who fought so often, I started recognizing the rhythm of their arguments. After my breakup with Mia, I just wanted silence, solitude, a place where I could hear myself think. The building was old but charming. 4 stories tall, faded yellow brick, ivy crawling up one side. The stairwell creaked and the elevator was perpetually out of service, but I didn't care. I lived on the 3rd floor, apartment 3B. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, big windows facing the street. Rent was cheap, utilities included. Perfect. At first it was everything I wanted. Quiet mornings, still nights. Until I realized that quiet wasn't always comforting. Sometimes it was wrong. The first few days were fine, though I did notice something odd. No one ever seemed to come or go from the apartment above mine. Apartment 4B, the mailbox had no name, just resident. I never saw anyone enter it. Never heard footsteps or voices. But about a week after I moved in, that changed. I was lying in bed one night scrolling my phone when I heard it. Faint, muffled footsteps from above. Slow, deliberate, pacing. At first I was almost relieved, finally proof that someone actually lived there. But the pacing continued. Back and forth. Back and forth. For hours, then came the dragging noise, like furniture being pulled across the floor. It was subtle but constant. I figured they were just moving things around, maybe redecorating late. But the next night it started again. Same time, same pattern. Slow footsteps, dragging sound, then silence. I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "What the hell are you doing up there?" The footsteps stopped. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute of silence. Then 3 soft knocks, and directly above my bed I froze. They weren't random, they were deliberate, like someone answering me. I sat up slowly, staring at the ceiling. The knocks came again, slower this time, 1, 2, 3. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I asked the landlord if anyone lived above me. He frowned, scratched his chin, and said, "Yeah, a lady named Mrs. Carter. Been there for years." He said she was quiet, kept to herself, barely ever leaves that apartment. I asked if she might be moving furniture around late at night. He gave me a strange look. "Mrs. Carter? She's in her 80s. Uses a walker. Doubt she's moving anything heavy." I laughed it off and went back upstairs. But the idea of an 80-year-old woman dragging furniture around at 2 a.m. made no sense. Still, I convinced myself it was harmless. Old buildings creak. People make noise. Maybe I was overthinking it. Then things got worse. About a week later, I woke up to the sound of something rolling across the ceiling, like a ball. It moved slowly from one side of the room to the other, then stopped. I lay there staring up, waiting for it to happen again. And it did. Roll. Stop. Roll. Stop. Then came a faint thump, followed by a whisper. It sounded like someone talking softly through the ceiling, too muffled to understand, but definitely words. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to listen. The whispering stopped. Then after a long pause came another sound, knuckles dragging slowly across the plaster above my bed. I turned on the light, half expecting to see cracks forming or dust falling. Nothing. The next morning, I decided to talk to Mrs. Carter. I climbed the extra flight of stairs to 4B and knocked on the door. No answer. I tried again, louder. Still nothing. I pressed my ear against the wood. I couldn't hear movement, but there was this faint sound, like someone breathing close to the door. I stepped back. Mrs. Carter? Silence. Then, a soft tap from the other side. I bolted back downstairs. The noises continued every night after that. Always starting around midnight, always stopping at dawn. I stopped sleeping in my bed. I started crashing on the couch with the TV on, volume low, trying to drown out the dragging, pacing whispering. One night, I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back the next morning, I almost dropped the phone. The audio wasn't just footsteps, and there was a voice. Faint, distorted, like it was just beneath the static. "I know you hear us," that's what it said. I replayed it over and over, convincing myself it was some weird interference. Maybe from the pipes or an apartment radio. But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. I called the landlord again. He sounded irritated. "Look, kid, Mrs. Carter's been there longer than I've owned the building. She's quiet, she's harmless. You probably just hear the boiler or the plumbing." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? The ghost of your elderly tenant is whispering through my ceiling. So I let it go. For a while. Then came the water. One morning I woke up and my bathroom floor was soaked. I looked up. A dark, wet spot had formed on the ceiling above the shower. I called the landlord again. He said he'd send someone up to check on Mrs. Carter. That night I didn't hear footsteps. No dragging. No whispers. For the first time in weeks, the building was silent. The next day, the landlord knocked on my door looking pale. "You're not going to believe this," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Maintenance went up there and the place was flooded. The ceiling collapsed in her kitchen. I asked if Mrs. Carter was okay. He looked confused. "That's the thing. No one was there. Apartment's empty. Hasn't been touched in years. We're trying to track down next of kin." I blinked at him. "What, you told me she still lived there?" He frowned. "That's what the old tenant file said. But there's dust everywhere. Power's off. No signs of anyone living there." "You sure you didn't just hear pipes or something?" I just stared at him. I didn't even know what to say. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Empty apartment, no tenant, no electricity. And yet, around midnight, the footsteps returned. Slow, heavy, deliberate. This time there was no dragging sound. No whispering. Just pacing, right above me, same rhythm as before. I sat up, trembling. "Who are you?" I whispered. The pacing stopped. Then 3 slow knocks right above my bed. The next morning I packed a bag and left. I didn't wait for sunrise. I didn't check out or tell the landlord. I just left the keys on the counter and walked out the front door. A month later I got curious. I looked up the building online. The city property records listed apartment 4B as vacant since 2015. The last registered tenant was a Margaret Carter, deceased. The cause of death? Drowning due to a burst pipe in her kitchen ceiling. That's what caused the flooding. That's what I'd seen dripping through my bathroom. And every night after, the faint sound I'd heard pacing above me. It wasn't her moving furniture. It was her trying to find the source of the water. I've been working at the same small-town radio station for 8 years, hosting the overnight slot from midnight to 4. The show's called Nightlines. It's one of those late-night talk programs where insomniacs, truckers, and lonely souls call in to share stories, song requests, or confessions they'd never say in daylight. It's quiet work, peaceful most nights, until that night, the night he called. My studio sits at the edge of town in a squat brick building surrounded by nothing but empty fields. From the parking lot, you can see the red light on the transmission tower blinking against the sky like a heartbeat. It gets lonely out there. The hum of the equipment, the flicker of fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee that's been sitting too long. You learn to live with the silence between songs. I started my shift like usual. Check the mics, test the board, make sure the signal's clear. The station was half dead even during the day. By night, it felt like a mausoleum. At 12:07 a.m., the phone line lit up. The number wasn't familiar. No caller ID, just unknown. That wasn't rare. Some people used burner phones or called through old landlines. I picked up, smiled into the mic. "Nightlines, you're on the air." "Who am I talking to?" There was a pause, just static. Then a low, uneven breath. "Hello," I said. "You're live." A man's voice came through, hoarse, quiet, like he was speaking through sandpaper. "You shouldn't be there." I frowned. "Excuse me?" "You shouldn't be there," he repeated, louder this time. "Not tonight." I muted the line, thinking it was a prank. Weird callers weren't unusual. Drunks, teenagers, even the occasional conspiracy nut. But something about his tone chilled me. I hung up. Then the line lit up again. Same unknown number. This time I didn't answer. I let it ring. The light blinked for nearly a minute before finally going dark. I shrugged it off. Cued the next song, The Animals, House of the Rising Sun. The moment the music started playing, I felt something shift in the room. The studio door creaked open, slowly. I froze. I was alone. I always locked that door, always. The air felt thick, heavy, like static before a thunderstorm. I got up, walked over, and closed it again. The latch clicked. When I sat back down, the phone line lit up once more. This time I answered. "Listen, whoever you are, you need to stop calling." The man didn't speak right away, just breathing ragged, uneven. Then, "You left the door unlocked." I went cold. I looked at the studio door, unlocked. I knew it was. "I just checked it. Who is this?" I said. "You left the door unlocked," he repeated, whispering now. "He's inside." I slammed the call button, cutting the line. My heart was pounding. I spun my chair toward the security monitor on the wall, one of those grainy black and white feeds showing the hallway, the front door, and the transmission tower outside, all empty. But when I looked closer, I noticed something strange. A faint smudge on the lens of the hallway camera. Like fog. Then it moved, not a smudge. A shadow. Someone was standing just at the edge of the frame, motionless. I grabbed my phone and called the station manager, Rick. He lived 20 minutes away. He didn't pick up. I left a message, shaky, panicked, telling him someone might have broken in. When I hung up, the monitor flickered. The shadow was gone. The studio felt darker, colder. I sat perfectly still, listening. The song ended. Silence filled the room. Then, the phone rang again. Same number. Unknown. I didn't want to answer, but part of me couldn't help it. Hands trembling, I picked it up. This time the man was crying. Softly. "I told you not to be there," he whispered. "They're coming through." "Who?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's coming through?" Static filled the line, but behind it I heard something else. A faint rhythmic clicking, not from the phone, from the equipment. The transmitter panel. Lights flashing erratically like a heart monitor losing its pulse. The speakers hissed. Then a sound came through, and low at first, then rising. It wasn't feedback. It was voices, dozens of them, whispering in unison. I ripped off my headphones, but I could still hear them. Not through the speakers, in the air, every word overlapping, distorted, but one phrase stood out clear as day. "We are already here." The power flickered. The monitors went black for a second, then came back on. All the feeds were different now, not live. They showed rooms that didn't exist in the building. A long, narrow hallway with doors on either side. A basement filled with standing water. A dark figure sitting in front of an old radio, its red light glowing faintly in the dark. I stared in disbelief. Then one of the cameras panned slightly, on its own, until it pointed straight at the studio door. Someone knocked, 3 times. Slow. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The knock came again, louder. "Rick?" I called out, but my voice sounded small. Nothing. I took a deep breath, grabbed the heavy flashlight from under the console, and walked to the door. I could see through the small rectangular window. The hallway outside was pitch black. I shined the flashlight. Empty. But as I stood there, staring, I noticed something strange. The reflection of the studio behind me in the glass. There was a man standing there. I spun around. No one. The chair was still spinning slightly, like someone had just stood up from it. The phone rang again. Same number. This time, when I answered, there was no static. Just the man's voice, calm, steady, almost peaceful. "They like your voice." I slammed the phone down. The transmitter lights began flickering faster. The hum turned into a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the floor. Then I realized the sound wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was coming from inside the walls. The metal panels trembled. The air ducts groaned. The lights dimmed until the only thing visible was the red glow from the on-air sign above the door. Something moved in the dark, behind the glass of the control booth. A silhouette, tall, thin, watching, then another beside it. Then another. I stumbled back, hitting the desk. The sound grew louder, that low hum turning into whispers again. "Stay with us. Keep talking. They can hear you now." The phone line lit up, not one, but every line. All blinking at once. I didn't even know that was possible. They all started ringing in unison, overlapping, shrill and endless. The sound built until I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the power switch. Everything went dark. Silence. For a few seconds, I just stood there, gasping in the dark. Then, one of the phones rang. No lights. No power, but the phone was ringing. Slowly, I picked it up. This time, it wasn't the man's voice. It was mine. "You shouldn't have turned it off." That was the last thing I remembered before blacking out. When I woke up, it was daylight. Rick was shaking me awake. "Jesus, man, what the hell happened?" I looked around. The studio was a mess, papers everywhere, the equipment fried. Every light on the switchboard was dead. Rick said he'd gotten my voicemail, came by around 3 a.m., but found the front door locked from the inside. He called the cops, but when they got there, the place was empty. I wasn't there. He said he came back in the morning and found me slumped over the console, still holding the phone. I tried to tell him about the voices, the calls, the things I saw, but he just stared at me like I was losing it. They reviewed the security footage, but the cameras had gone out around 12:10 a.m., the exact minute of the first call. After that, nothing but static. I quit the station 2 days later. I couldn't go back there, not after what I'd heard. But sometimes late at night, I still turn on the radio just to fill the silence. And every once in a while, when I scan the AM bands, I catch a faint signal that shouldn't be there. A voice under my voice and whispering through the static, "You shouldn't be here." Then the line goes dead, and the red light on my clock radio blinks like a heartbeat.